Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Sutra. We talk all things PA, how to get into PA school, how to navigate PA school. I provide you guys with encouragement and tips. I also do vlogs around career, lifestyle, faith, and overall encouragement. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and I'd be honored to have you join the family. So we're gonna get straight into it. I'm gonna be going over my PA school curriculum. So this is something that I wish I had when I was going into PA school. I really wanted a breakdown of what each semester is like, so I hope I'm able to deliver for you guys in this video. So my program was 1 full year and 3 months of didactic education and then 1 full year of clinicals. So for this, I'm mainly going to focus on the didactic portion because clinicals is different for everyone. The first semester was the hardest for me just because like getting back into school wasn't something that I guess I was really prepared for. So it was the hardest in terms of like coming up with a good study habit that would stick for a lot of material. I had never studied that way before, so that's why the first semester was the hardest for me. But in terms of actual like educational material, it was probably one of the easier semesters. I took anatomy, and this is the class that really humbled me. I had to do a lot of memorization to get good grades in anatomy. So we had 2 types of exams in anatomy. One of them was like for the actual class itself, and then the other exam was lab, and both of them were equally as difficult to me. The lab exams were more based on like clinical education, so it was more analytical thinking, whereas just the regular exams was more so like pointing towards stuff like what is this bone, what ligament attaches here, what movement does this muscle make, so things like that. Quick little story, when I took anatomy, I ended up failing my first 2 exams. So I failed my anatomy exam and the lab exam, and that really took a toll on me, y'all. I was like, oh my gosh. But then we made a comeback, and the way I was able to do that was with Anki. I've talked about Anki on here before because I love my girl. Like, Anki is so good. It can be time consuming to make the cards, but I feel like once you get a hang of how to use it and how to study using Anki, like, she literally saved my life. The second course was clinical assessment. Clinical assessment mainly focused on H&Ps, so how to take a history and physical. To me, this is one of the most important classes because it's really what you do once you get in the outside world. So going into clinicals, you're gonna use a lot of what you learned in clinical assessment, so it's really important to pay attention. I remember only having 2 exams in that class, so you can kind of get sidetracked because it doesn't feel as important because it doesn't have as much exams that you're getting graded on. But it's so important, so definitely pay attention because when you go into clinicals and you have to do a history, if your history is not good, like not only does that look bad on you as a student, but it also just looks bad for the PA profession as a whole because it's like, what kind of students are you guys putting out there? So always remember that you're representing the whole field, so always put your best foot forward. Class number 3 was physiology, and this class I think was the hardest material-wise, but I enjoyed it the most just because it was really analytical and I really like to see how things connect and why things happen the way they do. So it's basically that, it just tells you like how the body functions. It's really important to pay attention in this class because so many other courses build off of physiology, so it's really good to have like a firm foundation. The way I studied for my physiology course was by doing outlines and then studying in groups. Last class we had for semester 1 was microbiology. Microbio came in halfway through semester 1. So in the beginning, we were only taking 3 courses. I believe this is because the school really wanted us to kind of like get a hang of things. And then halfway through the first semester, we ended up taking microbio. Microbio felt like a class I was taking in high school just because it didn't really have, like the way our professor taught it, it didn't really have like any clinical applications. It was more so like this bacteria, this cell wall, and like that kind of microbiome. But when you do take infectious disease, you realize, oh, I probably should have remembered that from microbiome. I studied using Anki for it as well because it was mainly a lot of memorization, and I find that Anki is really good for courses where you basically just have to memorize everything. So that was semester 1. Moving on to semester 2. Semester 2 for us started in January. So class number 1 was clinical skills. Clinical skills was divided into EKG and lab skills. So EKG, obviously we learn the EKG. This is really important to pay attention to as well. Every class is important. And then we had lab skills. Going through lab skills, like y'all, I promise you, I didn't know what the heck was going on. I was like, I'm so confused. How are people understanding this? Like, what is happening? And then eventually I got it. So if you feel like you're taking a course and you're like, I don't know what's happening, I promise you, you will understand at some point, even if it's when the course is over. Cause that would happen to me. I would be like, I don't know what we just did. And then you take another course and I'm like, oh, that's what y'all was trying to teach? Okay, so that was me in clinical skills. Second class was clinical assessment 2. So it just basically built off of clinical assessment 1. So it was basically history and physicals. And then in this class, this is when we started to introduce OSCEs. So OSCEs is basically kind of like a stimulated physical exam. So you have a patient and they come with a problem and you have to go through the H&P, come up with a diagnosis, do your physical exam. So this is really good practice for the real world. And it tests how you're able to come up with a clinical decision. The third class was clinical applications or clinical based evidence, something like that. I can't remember. But this class was the course we took to be able to write our capstone. So I believe every PA school you have to write a capstone at the end of the program, and this is the course we use to go through that process. And your capstone is basically your research paper that you write for PA school, and you just get to choose any topic that you want to write about, and it's like a literature review. Course number 4 was integration into clinical concepts. Guys, if I told you what this was about, I literally cannot remember. Even right now, I'm trying to remember what it was about, but I really cannot. Like, I have no idea what this course was about, guys. I really don't, but I'm giving you the information. Course number 5 is clinical medicine, and this is your actual medical courses. So the way my school did it is one clinical medicine course was broken down into multiple subjects, so multiple specialties. We started off with dermatology, and then we did ENT. We also did optho, cardio, pulm, and public health was also included. So because this is the semester where they introduced all of these medical courses, it was hard. It was definitely hard for me, like trying to grasp all of this information. And this is when that imposter syndrome really starts to kick in, because you're like, what is happening? Like, I'm really learning all of this stuff, and it goes by so fast, but you have to grasp all of this information. And the best way that I did that, y'all guessed it, for me was Anki and watching like a ton of videos. Whenever I didn't understand something, I tried to watch videos. And I did mention that Anki is good for memorization. And in these courses, there are things that you're gonna have to memorize, but there's also things that you should just know. Like, try to understand how certain things work so you can arrive to a conclusion without having to memorize everything. So this is super important for, I would say, like cardio and pulm, just understanding like how the body works and how the systems work. So that's super important. And you will find that as you progress in different specialties, a lot of times you need to know something from another specialty to see how they connect. Semester 3 was over the summer, so we didn't have as many courses. I believe it was 3 courses. The first one was, again, integration into clinical concept. Don't ask me what that is. Number 2 was clinical medicine. This time, clinical medicine included OBGYN, GI, endo, neuro, nephro, and psych. I remember this semester being super hard for me, only because I was going through a lot, like personally, and having all of these courses was not helping. But I had started this semester super strong because life was easy peasy, and then when things started to go sour in my personal life, I was able to still keep a good grade throughout the semester because I had started off really strong. So always try to start off strong, because you never know what can happen that kind of derails you. It's really good to have like a strong foundation, because then you won't have to like overwork yourself to try to keep up with your grades. The summer semester is also when we were introduced to pharmacology. So that was our 3rd course that we took, and pharmacology was honestly one of my favorite courses that I took in PA school, just because it was so practical and so useful, and it's one of the most important courses that you're going to take. So please, please, please pay attention. And a lot of times they like to say focus on the generic, and yes, you should focus on the generic, but if you can also try to memorize like a couple brand names, that's also good, because in the real world a lot of people do not use generics, but the PANCE only uses generics. So if you want to focus on learning for the PANCE, definitely focus on generics and passing your PA school exams. But just know, like, in the real world, people do use brand names. Okay, so next semester was semester 4. This one was thick, okay? There was a lot of courses and a lot was going on. So this was fall semester. We took 7 courses for that semester. So course number 1, integration into clinical concepts. Course number 2 was clinical skills. So this clinical skills was super fun. It's the one where you get to do casting and splinting. You get to learn how to do IV insertions, how to draw blood, all that stuff. This was super fun for us because it was completely hands-on. As far as the exams go, the exams were kind of difficult just because it's hard to test multiple choice on how to do like casting and splinting and how to draw blood and all that stuff. So they asked like super detailed questions because you can't test the actual physical, if that makes sense. So the course wasn't hard in itself, but the exams were kind of hard, if that makes sense. Next, we took human behavior, and I would describe human behavior as kind of like an ethical course. So you talk a lot about like patient perception of things, how to deal with burnout, stuff like that. The 4th course we took was evidence-based medicine. So again, this is the capstone course. At this point in the course, we were working on a group capstone so that we would be able to be more prepared when it came time for us to work on our individual capstones. And I believe that this was actually super helpful, like, because they didn't just throw us into like, here's this paper, like, write it. So the professors were there to really help guide us during our group capstone so that when we did it by ourselves, everything ran a lot more smoother. The next course was role of a PA, and this is where you learn all about the PA profession. This course was really interesting because I got to learn a lot about the PA profession, like things that I hadn't known before. You learn about like the history of the PA profession, and also based on the state that you're in, you also learn about the statutes. So what are PAs allowed to do in that specific state? And this is super important because as things change constantly, so it's up to us to know what it is that we can do so that when somebody tries you and they're like, oh no, you can't do this, you're like, well, actually the statutes say I can't. So I really enjoyed that course, and if you have a good professor, like the course is gonna be enjoyable for you. So the last course we took was clinical medicine 3. And this was our last clin med course. Emergency medicine, infectious disease, pediatrics, geriatrics, surgery, and ortho, and hematology. So that was our last semester of PA school, and at this point during your last semester, it's okay if you're feeling scared. It's okay if you're feeling like you don't know everything. I personally feel like I didn't know everything, but I was a lot more confident than when I was in the beginning of PA school. Like, it's actually insane the amount of stuff you learn, the amount of stuff that your brain can grasp. And then when you go into clinical year, you really get to test the knowledge that you know. Try not to be intimidated by the people around you. Try not to be intimidated by the doctors, the PAs, the nurses, all of that, because it can be intimidating. But you know your stuff and you're gonna do amazing once you get into a clinical year. So I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, as always, please leave me a comment and I'd be happy to answer them for you. Now go be great. Bye, my loves.